The grand concordance of the Ethelgard did not convene for trivialities. It convened only to dictate the rhythm of the galaxy, a rhythm they had composed and conducted for 10,000 cycles of unbroken starlight. The chamber itself was a testament to their supremacy, a colossal geode of hollowed, singing crystal suspended within the upper atmosphere of a gas giant that churned in violent bands of violet and gold below. Within the Hall of Refracted Truth, there were no shadows, only light, endless multifaceted light that bounced from the translucent walls to the polished obsidian table where the High Exarch sat. To sit here was to sit at the center of civilization, looking down upon the crude, darker corners of the universe with a mixture of pity and disdain. The air hummed with the resonant frequency of the station's shields, a sound that felt like safety, like eternity, like godhood. High Exarch Thaler, his skin the color of pale moonlight and his eyes faceted like the very gems that adorned his ceremonial robes, gestured with a slender, elongated hand toward the holographic projection hovering in the center of the room. The image was grainy, a deliberate choice by the censors to filter out the ugliness of the subject matter. But even the high-resolution smoothing could not hide the grotesque nature of the vessels on display. A ripple of amusement, sounding like the chiming of small bells, passed through the assembled counselors. They were beings of energy manipulation, of sleek curves and gravity-defying architecture, and what they saw before them was an insult to the very laws of aesthetics and aerodynamics that the Ethelgard held sacred. "They call them battleships," Thaler said, his voice a melodic purr that echoed perfectly off the acoustic surfaces. "A primitive designation for a primitive design. Observe the crude angles, observe the reliance on physical mass. These are not starships, my fellow exarchs, they are flying tombs. They are relics of an era before civilization understood the elegance of the waveform. They burn distinct chemical fuels. They utilize combustion. They are bound together by rivets and welds, scarred by the vacuum, utterly devoid of the shimmering fields that protect a civilized vessel. It is almost tragic that they have managed to stumble their way to our borders." Strategist Lyra, seated at the far end of the obsidian table, did not join in the chiming laughter. She was younger than the others, her carapace still hardening, her mind less clouded by the arrogance of millennia of peace. She leaned forward, her optical sensors narrowing as she studied the telemetry data scrolling beneath the holographic projection. While the others mocked the aesthetic ugliness of the Terran fleet, Lyra was looking at the density readings. The numbers were wrong. They were impossibly high. The ships were not just metal. They were dense composites of compressed alloys that shouldn't have been able to achieve faster-than-light travel without tearing themselves apart. "They are ugly, yes," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the mirth. The laughter died down, replaced by a polite, condescending silence. Thaler turned his gaze toward her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "But High Exarch, consider the mass. Our sensors indicate that the lead vessel, the one they identify as the Iron Duke, has a hull density exceeding that of a neutronium weave. They have no energy shields, none. They rely entirely on physical armor. Why would a species capable of traversing the void choose such an archaic method of defense? It requires immense energy to move that mass. It is inefficient. It is illogical, unless they are simply stupid," Thaler interrupted, dismissing her concern with a wave of his hand. "Do not mistake incompetence for strategy, Lyra. The Terrans are a young species, barely out of their planetary cradle. They found old schematics, perhaps leftovers from a dead precursor race that lacked the gift of the ether, and they copied them without understanding the nuances of higher physics. They are scavengers in a galaxy of architects. They have come to our border not to conquer, but to beg. Look at them. They drift. They do not maneuver with the grace of the flow. They simply exist, like rocks thrown into a pond." The projection zoomed in on the hull of the Iron Duke. It was indeed a scarred, brutal thing. There were no smooth lines, no glowing nacelles of antimatter containment. It was a block of dark gray metal, pitted by micrometeoroids, covered in external piping and massive, protruding distinct turrets that looked like industrial smokestacks. To the Ethelgard, who fought their wars with precision lasers and elegant plasma lances from distances where the enemy was merely a blip, the idea of a ship having turrets that physically rotated was laughable. It implied a range of engagement so close, so barbaric, that it turned warfare into a brawl rather than a duel. "We have sent the standard mandate," Counselor Vrex interrupted, his voice rasping like dry leaves. "Subjugation or expulsion, they must dismantle these abominations. and accept the protection of the Ethelgard Protectorate along with the necessary tithes, or they must retreat back to the mudball they spawned from. We have given them one standard cycle to respond. The time is nearly up. And if they refuse? Lyra asked, the feeling of unease growing in her gut. She watched the thermal output of the human ships. It was low, suspiciously low. It was as if the ships were dormant or cold or waiting. Thaler laughed again, a sound of genuine delight. If they refuse, strategist, we will do them a favor. We will vaporize those eyesores. It will take less than a microcycle. Our piercing beams will slice through that crude metal like light through water. It will be a mercy. We will teach them that the galaxy belongs to those who have mastered the energy of the stars, not those who dig in the dirt for iron. The atmosphere in the room was one of utter confidence. The Ethelgard Empire controlled 1,000 systems. Their fleets were works of art, golden crescents that danced through the void, shielded by energy barriers that could withstand the heat of a supernova. They had not known true defeat in recorded history because no one else had mastered the ether shields. Projectiles were obsolete. Missiles were intercepted by point-defense lasers. Only focused high-frequency energy could overload an Ethelgard shield, and the humans clearly possessed nothing of the sort. Their ships bristled with long, hollow tubes, cannons. Cannons! The very idea was so archaic it belonged in a museum. Suddenly, the ambient light in the chamber shifted from warm gold to a pulsing crimson. The low hum of the station changed pitch, becoming a throbbing vibration that rattled the crystal teeth of the counselors. "Report," Thaler commanded, though his voice betrayed no fear, only annoyance at the interruption. "They are hailing us," the automated system chimed, a disembodied voice that filled the room. "Audio only, high-density transmission, it is loud." "Put it through," Thaler sighed. "Let us hear their begging." The static that burst into the room was not the refined hiss of stellar radiation. It was the crunching, grinding sound of analog interference, raw and unfiltered. Then a voice cut through the noise. It was deep, weary, and lacked the melodic modulation of the Ethelgard tongue. It sounded like stones grinding together. "This is Admiral Harkin of the Terran Coalition heavy cruiser Iron Duke. We have received your mandate. We decline." Silence filled the hall of refracted truth. It was not a silence of fear, but of shock, the sheer audacity. Thaler blinked, his faceted eyes widening. "You decline? You are sitting in a collection of scrap metal on the edge of the domain of gods, and you decline. Do you understand what stands before you, human? A single one of our patrol cutters could dissect your entire fleet." "We are aware of your capabilities," the voice replied, calm, almost bored. "We have scanned your frequencies. You rely on harmonic resonance shields. You use high-yield thermal lasers. You prioritize speed and aesthetics over durability. We are not here to fight you, but we will not turn back. We are passing through. Grant us safe passage, and we will disturb nothing." "Passing through," Vrex scoffed. "You do not pass through the Ethelgard dominion. You submit or you vanish." "Then we have a problem," Harkin said. "Because we are not turning around, Harkin out." The connection severed with a sharp click. Thaler stood up, his robes shimmering with indignation. They dare to treat this council like a toll booth. Strategist Lyra, order the patrol fleet to open fire, target their engines, leave the hulls intact. I want a tow that scrapped back to the capital as a curiosity for the gardens." Lyra hesitated. Her claws hovered over the interface embedded in the table. "High Exarch, I recommend a warning shot. Their density, if those ships are as solid as they appear, they may possess kinetic energy we have not accounted for, and their refusal was too calm." "Do not be a coward, Lyra," Thaler snapped. "Fire." Reluctantly, Lyra keyed the command. On the holographic display, the elegant golden crescents of the Ethelgard patrol fleet, stationed a few thousand kilometers from the Terran formation, lit up. Beams of coherent light, pure and terrible, lashed out across the void. They were beautiful, searing lines of destruction that impacted the flank of the Iron Duke. The Council watched, expecting the human ship to shear in half, to explode in a cloud of burning atmosphere and debris. The beams hit, the metal glowed cherry red, the light scattered, refracting off the pitted hull. And then nothing. The beams ceased, the Iron Duke drifted forward unchanged. There was a scorch mark, a long, ugly scar of melted slag along eye. TS sighed, but the hull had not breached. The ship had simply absorbed the energy, the sheer thickness of its armor dissipating the heat into the surrounding mass. "Impossible," Vrex whispered. "That beam can cut through a moon's crust. They are using ablative armor, Lyra realized, her voice trembling. Layers upon layers of heat-resistant composites. They didn't try to shield against the beam, they just let it hit them. They built a ship so thick it doesn't care if it gets burned. Fire again, Thaler screamed, his composure cracking. Focus fire all ships. The Ethelgard fleet unleashed a storm of light. Plasma bolts and laser lances hammered the Terran fleet. The human ships rocked under the impacts, glowing with heat, debris spinning off into the void as armor plates were vaporized. But they did not stop. They did not raise shields. They simply took the punishment, plodding forward like juggernauts walking through a firestorm. And then the Iron Duke rotated its turrets. It was a slow, mechanical movement, lacking the grace of the Ethelgard systems. The massive barrels, long as skyscrapers, turned to face the golden crescents. They are locking on, Lyra said, her eyes glued to the readouts. Wait, I detect no energy buildup, no plasma charging, no tachyon accumulation. What are they doing? They are bluffing, Thaler sneered, though sweat was beading on his pale forehead. They have no weapons that can touch us. Our shields are impenetrable to matter. Projectiles will simply bounce off the ether field. On the screen, a series of small explosions rippled along the sides of the human railguns, gas venting, stabilizers locking. Then the Iron Duke fired. There was no beam of light. There was no visible streak of energy. There was only physics. Inside the massive railguns, magnetic fields accelerated a slug of ferric tungsten alloy the size of a shuttlecraft to a fraction of the speed of light. It was not elegant. It was a brute force application of Newton's laws. Force equals mass times acceleration. The Ethelgard shields were masterpieces of engineering, designed to disperse energy frequencies, to refract lasers and absorb plasma. They were designed to fight light with light. They were not designed to stop a 100-ton slug moving at relativistic speeds. The projectile from the Iron Duke did not bounce. It did not deflect. It slammed into the shield of the lead Ethelgard cruiser with the force of a falling asteroid. The shield flickered for a nanosecond, trying to interpret the attack as energy, failing, and then shattering under the sheer kinetic load. The feedback loop blew out the emitters instantly. The slug continued unimpeded. It struck the golden hull of the cruiser. It didn't just pierce the ship, it obliterated it. The kinetic energy transfer was so catastrophic that the Ethelgard ship didn't explode so much as it disintegrated, the impact liquefying the metal and the crew instantly, turning the elegant vessel into a rapidly expanding cloud of sparkling dust. The Hall of Refracted Truth went silent. The silence was heavy, suffocating. The Relic had just deleted a capital ship with a single shot. Shield failure, the automated voice intoned, devoid of emotion. Kinetic impact detected, magnitude critical. They threw a rock at us, Vrex stuttered, his mind unable to comprehend the violence. They just threw a rock. A rock moving at .1 light speed, Lyra whispered, horror dawning on her. High Exarch, we cannot fight this. Our shields are useless against kinetic bombardment of this magnitude. We are tuned for energy warfare. We are naked against them. Thaler stared at the cloud of dust that used to be his flagship. His arrogance, built over millennia, fractured like the crystal walls around him. Return fire, he whispered weakly. Destroy them. We are hitting them, Lyra cried out, gesturing to the screens. We have melted through 3 layers of their armor, but they have 20 more. They are built like bunkers. They are not ships, they are flying fortresses. They can take more punishment than we have ammunition to dish out, and every time they fire, we lose a ship. As she spoke, the other Terran vessels opened up. The void was filled with silent, invisible death. The Ethelgard fleet, beautiful and fragile, began to die. One by one, the golden crescents were shattered, turned into drifting debris fields. The Terran ships took hit after hit, their hulls glowing, scarred, pockmarked, but they never stopped. They were relentless, inevitable. Cease fire, Thaler screamed, his voice cracking. Signal surrender, signal it now. The order went out. The Ethelgard ships, those that remained, powered down their weapons and drifted, their beautiful lines broken, their crews paralyzed with terror. The Terran fleet ceased firing instantly. The sudden stillness of the battlefield was more terrifying than the noise. Open a channel, Thaler said, collapsing into high. Chair, he looked old suddenly. The light in the room seemed dimmer, less divine. The face of Admiral Harkin reappeared. He looked exactly as he had before, tired, unimpressed, a man doing a job he didn't enjoy. We accept your ceasefire, Harkin said. We did not wish to destroy your ships. You left us no choice. Your technology, Thaler struggled to find the words. It is primitive, barbaric. You throw matter across the void. How can such relics defeat the pinnacle of Ethelgard engineering? You built your ships for a duel, Harkin replied, and for the first time there was a hint of something deeper in his eyes, not arrogance, but a profound, melancholic wisdom. You built them to be beautiful, to fight other civilized nations who follow the rules of energy warfare. We didn't build our ships for war, Counselor. We built them for survival, and the universe is not a civilized place. We surrender, Thaler said, bowing his head, a gesture that had not been seen in the Council for 10,000 years. We will grant you passage. We will pay your tithe. Keep your money, Harkin said. We need coordinates. We need star charts of the sectors behind you, and we need to dock. Our reactors need coolant, and our armor needs repairs. If you grant us this, we will share our data with you. Trust me, you will want to see it. The transition from enemies to uneasy guests was jarring. The Iron Duke, a monstrosity of industrial might, docked with the crystalline, delicate structure of the high station. It was like a sledgehammer resting against a glass sculpture. When Admiral Harkin and his delegation airlocked into the station, the contrast was even more stark. The Ethelgard were tall, slender, draped in silks that shimmered with light. The humans were shorter, broader, encased in environmental suits that whirred with servos and hissed with recycled air. They carried their gravity with them. Their boots clanked heavily on the polished floors. Lyra was chosen to meet them, along with a humbled Thaler. As the humans removed their helmets, Lyra was struck by their appearance. They were scarred, pale, with eyes that seemed to look through the walls rather than at them. They did not look like conquerors. They looked like refugees. Admiral, Lyra said, bowing slightly, adhering to protocol even in the face of these strange beings. I am Strategist Lyra. This is High Exarch Thaler. We welcome you to the Hall of Refracted Truth. Harkin nodded, tucking his helmet under his arm. Strategist, Exarch, thank you for the dock. My engineers tell me your energy grids are compatible with our auxiliary intakes. Will be topped off in 6 hours. You possess kinetic weaponry of terrifying power, Thaler said, his voice regaining a sliver of its former haughtiness, though tempered by fear. Why do you hide it within such archaic shells? Why not refine it? Why not embrace the elegance of energy? Harkin looked around the gleaming hall at the light reflecting off the crystal. He reached out and touched a wall, his gloved hand leaving a smudge on the pristine surface. Elegance is a luxury, Harkin said quietly. We had an elegance once. We had shields, we had energy weapons, we had cities of glass and light, much like this one. We thought we were masters of the galaxy. What happened? Lyra asked, sensing a history that terrified her. We met something that didn't care about elegance, Harkin said. He motioned to one of his aides, who brought forward a heavy, rugged data slate. Harkin placed it on the obsidian table. It looked out of place, a brick of military-grade plastic on the surface of black glass. This is the data we promised, Harkin said, activating projection. The air above the table shimmered, but instead of the clear, golden light of the Ethelgard displays, this was a harsh, blue tactical map. It showed a region of space far to the galactic west, the direction the humans had come from. This was our home sector, Harkin said. The map showed hundreds of star systems. 300 years ago. Then the map changed. Systems began to wink out, not just the stars dying, but the data simply ceasing to exist. A darkness was spreading across the map, a void that consumed everything. What is that? Thaler whispered. A black hole cluster. No, Harkin said. It's a swarm. We call them the Hollow. They don't register on thermal scans because they absorb all energy. They feed on it. They eat light. They eat shields. They eat the fusion reactions of stars. Lyra felt a cold dread seep into her carapace. They eat energy. Everything you are, Harkin said, looking directly at Thaler, is food to them. Your shields, a dinner bell, your plasma weapons, you're just feeding them. Your beautiful crystal cities that hum with resonance. They will shine like beacons in the dark to the Hollow. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The Ethelgard had spent millennia perfecting energy manipulation, believing it to be the pinnacle of evolution. And now, this human was telling them that their greatest strength was their fatal weakness. When we first fought them, Harkin continued, his voice low and raspy, we used fleets like yours, sleek, shielded, energy-dependent. We lost billions in the first month. The hollow drained our ships dry and left the crews to freeze in the dark. We realized that to fight them, we had to go back. We had to go primitive. He gestured to the image of the Iron Duke that still hovered in the background. We built ships of cold iron and dense alloy. We stripped away the shields because they only attracted the enemy. We went back to kinetic slugs of metal because you can't eat a rock. You can't absorb the kinetic energy of a tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds. It just smashes you. We became quiet. We became heavy. We became the relics you laughed at because only the relics could survive. Lyra looked at the humans with new eyes. The scars, the heavy armor, the brutal efficiency of their design. It wasn't a lack of advancement. It was an adaptation. They had evolved backward technologically to survive a predator that preyed on high technology. They were not a primitive tribe stumbling into a modern city. They were the survivors of a forest fire, covered in ash, carrying the only tools that worked. "Why are you here?" Thaler asked, his voice trembling. "If you are fleeing." "We aren't fleeing anymore," Harkin said. "We ran for 100 years. We built these arc ships, these warships, to protect the last of our civilians, but we can't run forever. The hollow is fast. It's following our wake." Harkin leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "We came to your border because our scouts detected your energy signature from 1,000 light-years away. You are shining so brightly, Exarch, that the hollow is already changing course. They are coming for you." Thaler sank into his chair. We cannot fight something that eats energy. Our entire civilization is based on the ether. Our weapons, our defenses, our very atmosphere scrubbers. If what you say is true, we are already dead." "Not yet," Harkin said. "But you have to listen to us. You have to shut it down, all of it." "Shut down the Dominion?" Vrex gasped. "Impossible. We would be plunging ourselves into the Dark Ages." "Better the Dark Ages than extinction," Harkin snapped. "We can teach you. We can show you how to retrofit your fleets with kinetic hardpoints. We can show you how to armor your hulls. But you have to stop broadcasting your position to the entire universe." Lyra looked at the tactical map, at the encroaching darkness. She looked at the humans, these calm, terrifyingly pragmatic beings who had turned their entire civilization into a weapon of brute force. She realized that the Relic warships were not relics of the past. They were the only hope for the future. "Hi, Exarch," Lyra said, standing up. "We must mobilize the industrial guilds. We need to begin retrofitting immediately. We must lower the station's output to minimum life support." "But the culture," Thaler whimpered, "the light." "The light is death," Lyra said firmly. She looked at Harkin. "Admiral, if we agree to this alliance, will you stand with us? Can your ships protect us while we change?" Harkin straightened up. For a moment, the weariness seemed to drop from his shoulders, replaced by the rigid steel of military discipline. "We didn't come here just to refuel, strategist. We came to build a wall. The Iron Duke and the rest of the Third Fleet are the rear guard. We have 5,000 more heavy cruisers jumping into the sector behind us. We call it the Anvil strategy." Harkin pointed to the map, where a line of red dots appeared, forming a barrier between the encroaching dark and the Ethelgard space. "You are the hammer," Harkin said, looking at the delicate aliens. "You have the industrial capacity, the resources, the speed we lack. We have the armor and the guns. We will hold the line. We will take the hits. We will let them break their teeth on our hulls. While we hold them, you build. You build the biggest, ugliest, heaviest kinetic cannons this galaxy has ever seen, and you mount them on every moon and asteroid in the system." The room was silent again, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of arrogance or shock. It was the silence of a war room, the silence of resolve. Thaler looked at the hologram of the Iron Duke. He no longer saw a primitive eyesore. He saw a shield. He saw a guardian. He saw the only thing standing between his people and the eternal dark. "So be it," Thaler whispered. "Let the lights go out. Let the galaxy go dark." The following months were a time of chaotic transformation for the Ethelgard. The Grand Conclave, once a beacon of singing light, went silent. The shimmering shields were dropped. The cities dimmed. To an outside observer, it would have looked as if the sea. Civilization had died, but inside in the dark, sparks were flying. Under the guidance of Terran engineers, the Ethelgard repurposed their matter synthesizers. They stopped making art and started making armor. They stopped tuning crystals and started forging tungsten. It was a painful transition. It went against every instinct of their culture. But every time they faltered, they looked up at the sensor arrays. The Terran fleet was out there, sitting in the dark void at the edge of the system. They were silent sentinels, their reactors dampened, their hulls cold. They were the relics, waiting for the storm. And the storm came. It arrived not with a bang, but with a sudden absence of stars. The background radiation of the universe simply ceased in a specific sector. The hollow had arrived. They were amorphous entities of dark matter and energy-siphoning fields, vast clouds of hunger that moved with terrifying speed. Lyra stood on the bridge of the refitted flagship, the Silent Prayer. It was still a golden crescent, but it was now covered in hasty slabs of gray durasteel armor, bolted on by human heavy lifters. It bristled with railguns that looked ugly and out of place on the sleek hull. "Here they come," Harkin's voice crackled over the comms. "Hold fire until they hit the engagement zone. Do not activate energy weapons. Do not give them a target to lock onto." The hollow swarmed into the system. They were invisible to the eye, detectable only by the way they blocked the light of distant stars. They swept toward the planet, drawn by the faint residual heat of the civilization. But between them and the planet stood the wall of iron. The Terran fleet did not maneuver. They did not dance. They activated their maneuvering thrusters just enough to maintain a tight formation, a literal wall of ships, hull to hull, kilometers thick. "They are impacting the line," Lyra watched the sensors. The hollow slammed into the Terran ships. If the ships had been shielded, the shields would have been drained instantly and the ships consumed. But the Terran ships were just cold metal. The hollow flowed over them, searching for energy, searching for the spark. They found only cold armor. And then the humans opened fire. It was the single greatest release of kinetic energy in the history of the sector. Thousands of railguns, point defense cannons, and heavy artillery pieces fired in unison. The void lit up, not with lasers, but with the sparks of muzzle flashes and the glowing trails of superheated metal slugs. The hollow, expecting energy to absorb, were met with physical violence. The mass-reactive rounds tore into the semi-corporeal forms of the entities. The sheer force disrupted their cohesion. The dark clouds shattered, dispersing into harmless radiation. "It's working," Thaler breathed, watching from the tactical plot. "By the flow, it's working." "We are taking heavy damage," Harkin reported. "Hull integrity on the Iron Duke is down to 60%. The physical impact of these things is like getting hit by a tidal wave, but we are holding." The battle raged for 3 days. It was a brutal, ugly, grinding slugfest. There were no graceful maneuvers. It was a brawl in a dark room. The Terran ships took a beating that would have disintegrated a lesser fleet. Armor plates were ripped off, compartments were crushed, but the ships did not break. They held the line. And behind them, the Ethelguard fired. Their newly installed railguns, powered by their immense reactors, now shielded and buried deep within the planet, hurled rounds the size of buildings into the fray. The combination of Terran resilience and Ethelguard industrial output created a kill zone that nothing could survive. When the last of the hollow dissipated, scattered into the cosmic winds, the silence returned. The Terran fleet was battered. The Iron Duke was listing, venting atmosphere, its bow crushed inward, but it was still there. Lyra looked at the screen. The Relic warships were smoking, scarred, and ugly, and they were the most beautiful things she had ever seen. The aftermath of the Battle of the Black Edge changed the galaxy. The Ethelguard did not return to their old ways. They could not. They had seen the truth of the universe, that light casts a shadow, and in that shadow monsters hide. A new council was convened, but not in the Hall of Refracted Truth. It was held on the deck of the Iron Duke, amidst the smell of ozone and hydraulic fluid. Thaler stood before Harkin. The High Exarch wore a new robe, one woven with fibers of ballistic mesh. "We laughed at you," Thaler said quietly. "We called your ships relics, we called them tombs." "They are tombs," Harkin said, looking at the casualty lists on his slate. "For brave men and women, but they are also homes." "We wish to form a permanent pact," Thaler announced. "The Dominion and the Coalition. We will provide the resources, the science, the logistics. You will provide the heavy lifting." "The anvil and the hammer," Harkin nodded. "I like the sound of that." Lyra stepped forward. She carried a small crystalline box. Inside, a shard of the great prism glowed softly. "We have a gift," she said. "We know you do not use energy shields, but our scientists have been working with your engineers. We have found a way to weave our resonance fields into your armor plating. It won't stop the energy drain, but it will reinforce the structural integrity of the matter itself. It will make the iron harder. Harkin took the box. Enchanted armor? He asked, a rare smile cracking his weary face. Reinforced molecular lattice, Lyra corrected, smiling back. But yes, magic armor. As the meeting concluded, Harkin walked to the viewport of the Iron Duke. He looked out at the Ethelgard fleet. They were still repairing, welding plates over their golden hulls. They looked tougher now, meaner. You know, Harkin said to Lyra, who stood beside him, the Hollow was just a scout force. Lyra froze. A scout force, but there were millions of them. The signal we intercepted before the battle, Harkin said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It wasn't a retreat order, it was a beacon. They were marking this galaxy. So they will return, Lyra said, the fear rising again. They will, Harkin agreed. He turned to look at her, and his expression was one of absolute, terrifying resolve. And when they do, they won't find a garden of glass and light waiting to be eaten. They'll find a fortress. He gestured to the combined fleets, the golden ships armored in gray, the iron ships humming with faint crystal light. They laughed at the relics, Harkin said softly. But relics are the things that survive the test of time. Let them come, we have plenty of ammunition. The camera pulled back, away from the window, away from the two figures standing against the starlight. It drifted through the scarred corridors of the Iron Duke, past the engineers welding bulkheads, past the Ethelgard technicians arguing with Terran mechanics about torque specs. It moved out into the void, showing the vast, mixed fleet. The Ethelgard ships no longer shone with a beacon's light. They were dark, silent, and predatory. The Terran ships were no longer alone. Far in the distance, in the deep black between galaxies, a shadow moved. It was vast, ancient, and hungry. It had consumed 1,000 civilizations that had relied on the crutch of energy, on the arrogance of light. It expected another meal. But as it turned its many eyes toward the Milky Way, it saw something new. It did not see the bright, tasty signature of unchecked energy. It saw a wall of cold iron. It saw a galaxy that had learned the hardest lesson of all, that in the dark you do not shine. You load your weapon and you wait. And for the first time in eons, the darkness hesitated. The galaxy was no longer a hunting ground. It was a bunker, and the relics were manning the walls.